when the speaker that really riled me up, the reason I responded that way is pertains to sexual grooming, is from the age of 12 to 15, I was sexually abused by a family member, and I had good parents. I had very good parents, and I still have very good parents. And I didn't tell my parents that I was sexually abused until I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I came out and shared with my father that I was sexually abused by a family member. And my dad, it broke his heart, and he asked the question, what did I do wrong? My mom asked the question, what did I do wrong? What could we have done differently? That question came from good parents. Good parents. My dad's a pastor. My mom was a professional in the educational field. Very good parents. I was in Jack and Jill. You name it, I had it all. I didn't have to ask for anything. My parents gave us whatever we wanted. Good parents. There are children who have not and still are not raised in these type of households. I can deal with the questionnaire. I can deal with that. We can talk about that we can deal with that later. It's line 47 that bothers me, to where, however, the consent of a parent or guardian is required for treatment of an STI or STD. The treatment of it. And I go back and ask the question about the child or the individual who cannot go to the parent and tell them that they have been sexually abused, because they are the abuser. So if we're going to do anything else, my hope is that we look at the legislation. Of course, again, I look at great parents like Senator Pizzo and every last one of my colleagues who have children here. But for the individual from the coalition to walk off with a smirk on his face from the question of the fact of sexual grooming and an individual being able to express that to a parent, that's what's disgusting. My colleagues are not disgusting. That's disgusting. And my hope is that even as we look at this bill before it comes to the floor, that we look at that one word, and that is treatment, to ensure that an individual who cannot go home and tell a parent about what has occurred and happened to them, that the least they can do is still get treatment.
Is there any other debate?
Madam Chair.
You're recognized.
Thanks. What I've learned in the past several years that I've been here is that people who are huge proponents of certain things have a difficult time of being introspective, of taking a good look at themselves. I remember when we had the first parental consent iteration, I said, listen, I looked around the room and I pointed to Anna Terry Flores and Manny Diaz and Lauren Book and all of these people talking about, and Rob Bradley. I'm like, you guys are awesome parents. You guys are great parents. This is not a concern for your families and your households. And I even said, if this was the Pizzo household, I'm pressing the yes button on a parental consent, because there's nothing I don't want to know. I want to know everything about my kids. But we're looking at it through the lens and the perspective of the happy families that we all have. We have our problems, obviously, with health care provided by the taxpayers. Thank you. Now, to have balance, there's mandatory reporting under Florida statutes as it relates to child abuse, and that includes neglect, abandonment, soiled pants, and those things, and people should use that. It's unfortunate that teachers and other professionals have to use their names. They can't do so anonymously like the rest of the public can. Maybe that's something we should tweak, and people would feel more comfortable about reporting it. But here's the reality. I was terrified of telling my dad some stuff. Terrified. And you want to know something? I was not a good kid. Not malicious, but I was not a good kid. But in the worst of worst days, when he was most angry at me, he still never deprived me of clothing, shelter, or food. So I can't imagine what it's like for some kids to have to face their parents. The folks who are huge proponents pushing this are so incredibly fixated on minors' genitals and sexual activity. It's weird, folks. It's weird. Raise your own children. Raise your kids. Don't worry about mine. Raise your kids. And here's the reality. You don't have a really good relationship with your kids if you're up here trying to get in a relationship with mine. That's it. Mind your own business.
Is Senator Grall, you recognize to close on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. Thank you to those who came to speak today, and for sharing where you are on these issues. I think it's frustrating, Senator Pizzo, to hear the people that are supportive of parental rights are centered on minors' genitals and sexual activity. I personally have been focused on parental rights for a number of years, and my issue is that I don't want anybody else talking about my children with about those things. Like that's my job. And right now there are systems that come up, and instead of the parent being there as a first educator, there are systems that introduce to all children very early, and it's a one-size-fits-all. And so I do think that people come to this issue with a pure heart and understand that we do have vulnerable children. Our systems for mandatory reporting are clearly not working all the way around. There is no excuse for some of the horrific stories we have heard. None. But we can't take away the due process rights of all parents because people aren't using the systems that we have in place. And that's where we can't legislate only to the most vulnerable and ignore the rights of all families. And if you go back and look, I've been back into the 90s when some of these policies were put into place, and the core focus of it was the family. It was, how do you work on mental health issues with the family, with the child and the family together? It was always an and. And now we've seen so many systems come up and say, it's not an and anymore. There is somebody else who in fact knows better. It's somebody who has figured out, but there's public funding available, clearly. Because we don't have to notify parents, it means there's not going to be payment unless there's public funding available. And so I hear the concerns. I'm open to how we can address those, because I don't want for any young woman to face sterilization for lack of treatment. I do believe that as a parent, if my child has an STI and I'm not notified, there are crimes that could be being committed against my child that I have no ability to intervene. And if there is not a mandatory reporting situation going on, when you have a minor child come to you who has an STD, it is likely that a crime could have been committed against that child. So the numbers don't match up on both sides of that issue, and we need to get to the bottom of that. With that, I'd ask for your favorable support of the bill today and continued engagement on an issue which I think is very important.
Cindy, please call the roll on CS for SB 1288.